I'm going to be talking about patterns from the future, and I actually do feel like I'm in the year of 2015. I'm Dr. Marty, Dr. Brown, Emmett Brown, coming into the future and saying, Marty, they have mobile phones. I can order cabs, feed your pets, right? That's good for Einstein. He didn't have to sort of eat out of the slop. But I'm going to talk about what we are seeing, where the analytical community or modeling community is moving towards, and what are some of the future trends that we are hopefully seeing around the curve that we'll share with you. So it's a question of art and process, and let me explain what I mean by art and process. So for any kind of modeling activity that you need to do, the basic foundations for any kind of modeling activity essentially is around data, is around discovery, and of course, most importantly, it's around deployment of those models. What do I mean by that? So let's look at the art part of it, right? So modeling has been done, statistical modeling has been done for the longest period of time, but it's been a long and arduous process in many ways, primarily because of data, primarily because of the compute capabilities that are needed, and of course, deployment brings in its own set of challenges. From the art perspective, and it is an art, for folks out here who might be in the statistical field, who are quants, who are data scientists, you know it's an art, right? Especially if anybody's done sampling, you know it's a dark art to do sampling, right? And very few people have sort of mastered that dark art of sampling. But data is the raw material, right? And the whole idea is it's flexible because you're constantly interrogating the data. You're building prototypes. You're building a lot of prototypes. You know, somebody once described it to me as it's almost like building a ship inside a bottle, right? It requires you to be very precise in the way that you build your statistical models, in the way you sort of look at external variables that might affect your statistical model, and what kind of outcomes you're getting out of that particular model. The crew that's typically required for doing this, designing a ship in a bottle, are basically data scientists or quants or statistical modelers, smart creatives in terms of being able to query the data, query and find out interesting trends and topics. The approach also is now of open source or whatever works to answer that question. So if I'm looking at Spark, I'm looking at R or any of those capabilities to sort of look at what statistical modelings I can do from those. Those are also very welcome. It's also about very departmental and personal. By departmental, essentially, it's usually sort of within certain silos of businesses that actually go ahead and do these statistical modeling areas. But it also lends itself to a lot of innovative exercises. And you know, there is nothing that tells a story better than an analytical story, right? Analytics just lends itself to some great storytelling. And of course, then it's the data. Right? And the data has always been the challenge, which is it's readily available, it's easy to access, it's structured, and so nowadays it's a lot of unstructured. So here we have historically been doing all of this work, which was basically an art in terms of how that modeling activity was done. But where we are seeing it moving towards, and where we see it in the near horizon, is essentially about it moving in from an art to moving it into a process, right? So it's almost like moving it from creating a craft beer into a more standard by the barrels kind of beer, right? So that's where we're moving towards more of a process of taking this art and building it into a process. There are some basic assumptions we're looking at when we look at the process. First of all, information is a finished product. It's a documented process because essentially the whole idea is there has to be a model governance that's building. Let me explain what I mean by that. There is with the massive amounts of data that's actually coming in and the different varied amounts of data, statistical modeling, or modeling as such, is taking on a completely different shape, and that shape is essentially around half-life. So model life is actually reducing quite a bit, and in the way you got to constantly pay attention to the model and sort of fine-tune the model. So the idea is, how do you take that that art into a process, establish governance on it, and then, of course, take those thousands of models that are built using these different rule engines, these different model engines, generate scorecode, right, out of those statistical models that are built, and then while you generate those scorecode, put them into an operational environment such as a database, an operational environment such as Hadoop, which then goes in and runs within that particular operational environment. So it's a question of building the statistical model, making it into a process in terms of how you build it, and then finally going ahead and operationalizing it. This is what we see as being the key in being able to deploy these hundreds and thousands of models that are very organization specific, right? That was a short talk, but do come by the booth, visit us, and we're more than happy to talk to you more about where we see this trend going in. Thank you very much, and have a great conference. Thank you.